Ambassador Klik-Vorth adjusted his 6 sensory stalks for the 3rd time in as many minutes, a nervous habit he'd developed since being assigned to monitor the human colony ship, Resilient Dawn. The vessel hung in space like a metallic tumor against the star field. And frankly, Klik-Vorth was beginning to think the tumor analogy was more accurate than he'd initially intended. "So, let me understand this correctly," he said to his aide, Peripheral Unit 9, whose translucent blue form flickered with what Klik-Vorth had learned to recognize as barely contained hysteria. "The human younglings have established what they call a recreational violence society in the lower cargo bay of their educational vessel." "That's putting it mildly, sir," Peripheral Unit 9 replied, his voice carrying the electronic warble that indicated extreme distress in their species. "They're calling it Fight Club, and according to our surveillance drones, they've been engaging in what can only be described as organized brutality for the past 3 rotations." Klik-Vorth's mandibles clicked together in what humans might recognize as exasperation, though the sound was considerably more wet and disturbing than anything a human mouth could produce. "Just one thing before we begin. YouTube tells me 94.3% of you watching aren't subscribed. Subscribing is free. It really supports the channel, and you'll get more amazing HFY sci-fi stories delivered straight to you. Don't miss out. The humans had been in space for exactly 47 standard cycles, and already they were finding new and innovative ways to horrify the galactic community. It was almost impressive, if you ignored the mounting war crimes tribunal paperwork. "Show me the footage," he commanded, settling his bulk into the observation chair that creaked ominously under his weight. The holographic display materialized with a soft hum, and immediately, Klik-Vorth wished he hadn't asked. The cargo bay had been transformed into what appeared to be a gladiatorial arena, complete with makeshift seating constructed from shipping containers and exercise equipment that looked suspiciously like medieval torture devices. But it was the humans themselves that made Klik-Vorth's digestive system perform an uncomfortable loop. They were cheering. By the void, they were actually cheering, as 2 of their species mates pummeled each other with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. The combatants, a stocky male with the build of a small siege engine and a wiry female who moved like liquid violence, circled each other with grins that would have been terrifying on any predator species. The large one is called Marcus Brick Thompson. Peripheral Unit 9 provided helpfully. Age 19 standard, studying what humans call mechanical engineering. His opponent is Elena Vasquez, age 18, pursuing astrophysics with a minor in something called kickboxing. "They study violence as an academic subject?" Klik-Vorth asked weakly. "Apparently, sir. Though I'm told kickboxing is considered a recreational activity among humans." Klik-Vorth watched in growing horror as Elena landed a blow that would have shattered the exoskeleton of most civilized species, only to have Marcus respond with what sounded suspiciously like laughter. The crowd of watching humans erupted in appreciation, and several exchanged what appeared to be primitive betting tokens. "Sir," Peripheral Unit 9 continued, his form now flickering so rapidly it was giving Klik-Vorth a headache, "there's more. According to our intelligence, this Fight Club was established by a human named Jake Morrison, age 20, studying philosophy, and apparently the son of Admiral Morrison, the human fleet commander. The Admiral's offspring is organizing gladiatorial combat." Klik-Vorth's voice rose to a pitch that made nearby equipment rattle. "This is going to require so much paperwork. The Galactic Ethics Committee is going to have my hide mounted on their conference room wall." On the display, Marcus had managed to grapple Elena into what humans apparently called a bear hug, which seemed to involve no actual bears, but considerably more violence than Klik-Vorth thought was strictly necessary. Elena responded by doing something with her elbow that made several watching humans wince and cheer simultaneously. "There's something else, sir," Peripheral Unit 9 said, and his tone suggested that whatever came next was going to require additional sedatives. "They have rules." "Rules?" Klik-Vorth perked up slightly. "Rules suggested civilization. Rules suggested that perhaps this wasn't the complete descent into barbarism it appeared to be." "Yes, sir." Rule 1. Nobody talks about Fight Club outside of Fight Club. Rule 2. Nobody talks about Fight Club outside of Fight Club. Klik-Vorth stared at his aide with all 6 eyes. "That's the same rule twice." "Yes, sir. Humans appear to believe that repetition increases effectiveness." Rule 3. If someone yells, "Stop," goes limp, or taps out, the fight is over. Rule 4. Only 2 humans to a fight. Rule 5. 1 fight at a time. Rule 6. No shirts, no shoes during combat. Rule 7. Fights will go on as long as they have to. Rule 8. If this is your first night at Fight Club, you have to fight. Each rule made progressively less sense to Klik-Vorth's ordered mind. They remove protective clothing, and they force newcomers to engage in combat. This is barbarism dressed up with bureaucracy. It gets worse, sir. They've developed a ranking system. Winners gain what they call street cred, and losers apparently gain character. Both concepts seem to be highly valued in human society. On the display, the fight had ended with Elena performing some sort of acrobatic maneuver that left Marcus flat on his back, grinning like a demented carnivore while blood trickled from his nose. The crowd erupted in applause, and several humans pounded Marcus on the shoulders in what appeared to be congratulatory violence. "They celebrate defeat?" Klik-Vorth asked faintly. "Human psychology is complex, sir. Our xenopsychologists believe that humans derive satisfaction from both inflicting and receiving controlled violence. They call it cathartic." Klik-Vorth made a note to have the xenopsychology department evaluated for possible mental contamination. No sane species would find such behavior understandable, let alone predictable. The display shifted to show Jake Morrison himself, a lean human with dark hair and eyes that held an unsettling combination of intelligence and mischief. He was addressing the crowd with the sort of casual charisma that had probably started more wars than Klik-Vorth cared to count. "All right, people," Jake was saying, his voice carrying easily over the assembled humans. "That was beautiful work from Elena and Marcus. Remember, this isn't about winning or losing. This is about finding out what we're made of when everything else gets stripped away." "Philosophy," Klik-Vorth muttered. "He's turning organized violence into an existential experience. These humans are going to give me an ulcer." "Actually, sir," Peripheral Unit 9 interjected, "preliminary reports suggest that human academic performance has improved by 12% since the Fight Club began operating. Stress levels are down, social cohesion is up, and disciplinary incidents outside of the club have dropped to nearly 0. Klik-Vorth felt something that might have been the beginning of a migraine forming behind his primary visual cluster. "You're telling me that organized violence is making them better students?" "It appears so, sir." The humans seem to be using controlled aggression as a form of stress relief and social bonding. On the display, Jake was introducing the next pair of fighters, a nervous-looking redhead named Tommy Park and a confident brunette called Zoe Williams. Tommy appeared to be having second thoughts about his life choices, while Zoe was stretching with the casual ease of someone who considered violence a hobby. "This is Tommy's first night," Jake announced to the crowd. "Everyone remember Rule 8. The assembled humans cheered, and Tommy's expression shifted from nervous to resigned to something that might have been determination. Zoe patted him on the shoulder with what appeared to be genuine encouragement. "They're supportive?" Klik-Vorth observed, confused. "Human bonding rituals often involve shared adversity, sir. By fighting each other, they're apparently demonstrating trust and respect." Klik-Vorth watched as Tommy and Zoe began circling each other. Despite his obvious inexperience, Tommy was trying to mimic the confident stance he'd observed in the previous fighters. Zoe, for her part, seemed to be deliberately pulling her punches, turning what could have been a massacre into something more resembling a violent tutorial. "She's teaching him?" Klik-Vorth asked. "Human learning often involves trial by fire, sir. Literally, in some cases." The fight progressed with Zoe clearly dominating, but taking time to demonstrate proper technique to Tommy. When he managed to land a solid hit, the HFY crowd erupted in appreciation, and Zoe actually smiled before retaliating with a combination that sent Tommy to the mat with dignity intact. "You did good, kid," she told him as she helped him to his feet. "Next time, remember to keep your guard up." Tommy, despite sporting what was going to be a spectacular black eye, grinned with something approaching euphoria. The crowd welcomed him with back slaps and congratulations, and Klik-Vorth realized with growing alarm that he was witnessing some sort of initiation ritual. "Sir," Peripheral Unit 9 said quietly, "our cultural analysts believe that the Fight Club serves multiple functions in human society. It provides physical exercise, stress relief, social hierarchy establishment, and communal bonding. In many ways, it mirrors the ritualized combat found in dozens of species throughout the galaxy. Except those species don't typically pursue it as recreational activity while enrolled in educational institutions," Klik-Vorth pointed out. "Most civilized beings grow out of ritualized violence around the time they develop writing systems. Humans appear to be different, sir." That was the understatement of the galactic cycle. Klik-Vorth had been monitoring human activity for 6 standard rotations, and every single report had contained some variation of "humans appear to be different." Different from what, exactly, was becoming an increasingly important question. The display showed Jake addressing the crowd again. "Before we continue," he said, "I want everyone to remember why we're here. This isn't about hurting each other. This is about pushing boundaries, finding limits, and discovering who we really are when the comfortable lies get stripped away." "Philosophical violence," Klik-Vorth groaned. "They're turning assault into self-actualization." "The human capacity for rationalization is impressive, sir." On screen, the next fight was beginning between 2 humans who appeared to be genuinely friends outside the ring. They exchanged friendly insults before proceeding to attempt to separate each other from consciousness with what appeared to be genuine affection. "I need to report this to the Council," Klik-Vorth said finally. "But how exactly do I explain that the humans have created a systematic violence program that's actually improving their social functionality?" "Very carefully, sir." Klik-Vorth's sensory stalks drooped with resignation. The Galactic Ethics Committee was going to have a collective nervous breakdown. The humans had been in space for less than 50 cycles, and they were already redefining the boundaries of acceptable behavior in ways that made seasoned diplomats question their basic assumptions about civilization. "Schedule a meeting with Admiral Morrison," he commanded. "If we're going to resolve this situation, I need to understand the human perspective on organized violence as recreational activity." "Yes, sir." "Should I mention the Fight Club specifically?" Klik-Vorth considered this. According to the rules, Nobody was supposed to talk about Fight Club. But, as the designated observer for the galactic community, surely he was exempt from human recreational violence protocols. "Yes," he said finally. "And Peripheral Unit 9? Prepare a full psychological evaluation request for the entire human contingent. I have a feeling we're going to need extensive documentation for the inevitable War Crimes Tribunal." As the display faded, Klik-Vorth couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Humans had a disturbing tendency to escalate situations in ways that defied all logical prediction. If they were turning recreational violence into philosophical enlightenment at the student level, what were the adults capable of? He was fairly certain he didn't want to find out, but given his position as official observer, he suspected he wouldn't have a choice in the matter. The humans were coming, whether the galaxy was ready or not, and apparently they were bringing their fists with them. Admiral Rebecca Morrison was exactly what Klik-Vorth had expected from the parent of a philosophical violence enthusiast. Terrifying. She sat behind her desk like a predator evaluating potential prey, her steel-gray eyes fixed on Klik-Vorth, with the sort of attention usually reserved for targeting systems. Her uniform was pressed to mathematical precision, and every piece of equipment in her office was arranged with military exactitude. "Ambassador," she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that had probably ended several small wars through sheer intimidation. "I understand you have concerns about my son's extracurricular activities?" Klik-Vorth shifted uncomfortably in his chair, which had been specifically designed for human anatomy, and was therefore actively hostile to his physiology. "Admiral Morrison, what your offspring has created goes beyond mere extracurricular activity. It's systematic, organized combat among civilians." Admiral Morrison's mouth curved into what humans called a smile, but which triggered every prey instinct Klik-Vorth possessed. "Ambassador, have you ever served in military capacity? I number. My species evolved past the need for organized violence approximately 3,000 cycles ago." "Ah!" The Admiral leaned back, and somehow this made her more threatening rather than less. "Then you might not understand the concept of controlled aggression training." Peripheral Unit 9, who had been silent since entering the office, finally spoke up. "With respect, Admiral, your son's Fight Club appears to lack the structured safety protocols typical of military training programs." "Does it?" Admiral Morrison activated her desk display, which immediately showed live footage from the cargo bay. "Computer, replay yesterday's incident involving Cadet Williams and Cadet Park." The hologram showed Zoe Williams sparring with a different human, a tall, lanky individual called Kevin Drake. Midway through their bout, Kevin stumbled and twisted his ankle badly enough that even Klik-Vorth could see the injury was serious. "Stop!" Zoe called immediately, and every human in the vicinity responded as if the word carried legal weight. The fight ended instantly, medical supplies appeared from nowhere, and Kevin was surrounded by concerned classmates within seconds. "Note," Admiral Morrison continued, "the immediate cessation of hostilities upon injury, the rapid deployment of medical assistance, the genuine concern for Cadet Drake's well-being. Computer, show me the follow-up." The display shifted to show Kevin 2 days later, his ankle wrapped but mobile, receiving supportive encouragement from the same humans who had been cheering his beating just days before. Several had apparently taken over his academic assignments to help him maintain his studies while recovering. "Your son has created a support network," Klik-Vorth realized with growing bewilderment. "Jake has created a family," Admiral Morrison corrected. "These young people are thousands of light years from Earth, facing an uncertain future in an unknown galaxy. They needed something to bind them together, something that would forge trust and mutual respect. So they chose violence, Peripheral Unit 9 asked. They chose honesty, the Admiral replied. Ambassador, what happens when members of your species disagree? Klik-Vorth considered this. We engage in structured debate following established protocols. Logical argument, evidence presentation, consensus building, and if consensus cannot be reached, we defer to superior authority or accept deadlock. Admiral Morrison nodded. Humans don't work that way. We're a confrontational species, Ambassador. When we disagree, we want to settle it directly, immediately, and definitively. The Fight Club gives them a way to do that without lasting damage. As if summoned by their conversation, Jake Morrison appeared on the display, addressing a group of new students. His father's features were clearly visible in his face, but where the Admiral radiated military precision, Jake projected relaxed confidence. Listen up, everyone, Jake was saying. Sarah Mitchell and Alex Torres here think they can solve their housing dispute through reasonable discussion. The crowd laughed, and both Sarah and Alex grinned. Alex thinks Sarah's been hogging the bathroom. Sarah thinks Alex leaves engineering equipment lying around like he's building a starship in their quarters. Because he is, Sarah called out, earning more laughter. Right, Jake continued. So we're going to let them work it out the honest way. 2 minutes, full contact, and afterwards they're going to shake hands and figure out a compromise that actually works. Klik-Vorth watched in fascination as Sarah and Alex approached each other with broad grins. They touched gloves in what appeared to be a formal greeting, then proceeded to attempt to reduce each other to component parts with cheerful enthusiasm. They're enjoying this, he observed. Of course they are, Admiral Morrison replied. Sarah's been wanting to hit something for weeks because of academic stress, and Alex has been spoiling for a fight since his girlfriend back on Earth stopped returning his messages. This gives them both what they need while solving their actual problem. The fight ended with Alex tapping out after Sarah got him in some sort of stranglehold that looked anatomically impossible. Both combatants were breathing hard and sporting various bruises, but they were also laughing. Okay, Alex panted. You can have the bathroom from 6 to 7 every morning, but I need the common area for my projects. Deal, Sarah agreed, helping him to his feet. But next time, maybe just ask instead of leaving thruster components in the refrigerator. Fair enough. They shook hands, and the crowd dispersed with the satisfied air of people who had witnessed a proper resolution to conflict. They solved a housing dispute through combat, Klik-Vorth said weakly. They solved a housing dispute through honest communication, Admiral Morrison corrected. The combat just cleared the air first. Peripheral Unit 9's form was flickering rapidly again. Admiral, surely you understand that the Galactic Ethics Committee will view this as barbarism. The Galactic Ethics Committee, Admiral Morrison replied, with the sort of diplomatic tone that had probably prevented several actual wars, consists of species who have spent millennia avoiding direct confrontation. They've created elaborate bureaucracies designed to prevent anyone from ever having to make a definitive decision or take personal responsibility for their actions. That's civilization, Klik-Vorth protested. That's stagnation. The Admiral stood, and Klik-Vorth was reminded that humans were considerably larger than his own species. Ambassador, how many major innovations has the galactic community produced in the last 1,000 cycles? Klik-Vorth thought about this. Well, there was the improved filing system for diplomatic correspondence and the new committee structure for evaluating committee structures. None, Admiral Morrison said flatly. You've achieved perfect bureaucratic equilibrium. No conflict, no growth, no change. Everyone's so afraid of offending someone that nothing ever gets accomplished. But that's peaceful, Peripheral Unit 9 objected. That's dead. The Admiral activated another display showing the broader human colony ship. Look at what my people have accomplished in 47 cycles. New agricultural techniques, improved recycling systems, enhanced social cooperation, better academic performance, decreased depression and anxiety, stronger community bonds, all because my son gave them permission to hit each other in a controlled environment. Klik-Vorth studied the data streaming across the display. The numbers were undeniable. Every metric of human social health had improved since the Fight Club's establishment. This is going to be very difficult to explain to the Council, he admitted. Ambassador, Admiral Morrison said, settling back into her chair, let me save you some time. Human civilization is built on controlled conflict. We compete, we argue, we fight, and we grow stronger through the process. We're not going to change that just because it makes other species uncomfortable. But surely there are limits, Klik-Vorth asked hopefully. Admiral Morrison's smile turned predatory again. Oh, absolutely. No permanent damage, no weapons, no fights outside the designated area, and no coercion. Jake's rules are quite reasonable. And if the Galactic Ethics Committee demands you shut down the Fight Club, then they're welcome to try enforcing that decision. The Admiral's tone suggested that such an attempt would provide considerable entertainment value, but I should mention that Fight Club membership now includes 60% of our student population, 30% of our civilian adults, and, well, let's just say that several of my senior officers have expressed interest in participating. Klik-Vorth felt his digestive system perform another uncomfortable loop. You are going to militarize recreational violence? I'm going to let human nature be human nature, Ambassador. We tried suppressing our competitive instincts during the early colony years. The result was increased domestic disputes, rising crime rates, and general social dysfunction. Jake's Fight Club has given us an outlet that actually strengthens our community bonds. On the display, another fight was beginning between two humans who appeared to be best friends outside the ring. They were trash-talking each other with obvious affection, while the crowd cheered for both participants equally. They're not trying to hurt each other, Klik-Vorth realized suddenly. They're trying to test each other. Now you're beginning to understand, Admiral Morrison said approvingly. Ambassador, every species in the galaxy develops social bonding mechanisms. Yours involves elaborate ritual sharing of emotional states. The Zentorians build group monuments. The Mesh Collective shares sensory experiences. Humans hit each other and then buy each other drinks. This is insane. This is effective. The Admiral stood again, clearly indicating that the meeting was concluding. Ambassador, you can report to the Ethics Committee that the Fight Club will continue operating under current parameters. Any attempt to interfere will be considered a hostile act against human cultural autonomy. Klik-Vorth and Peripheral Unit 9 exchanged glances, each recognizing the diplomatic equivalent of a declaration of war when they heard one. Admiral, Klik-Vorth said carefully, surely we can reach some form of compromise? Perhaps additional safety protocols or oversight from qualified medical personnel? The Fight Club already has both, she replied. Dr. Lisa Park, Tommy's older sister, incidentally, has been serving as unofficial medical supervisor since week 2, and the safety protocols are working perfectly. 0 serious injuries, 0 lasting psychological trauma, and 0 expansion of violence outside the designated parameters. But the Ethics Committee can file all the complaints they want. Ambassador, Humans have been fighting for millions of years. We've also been forming stronger social bonds through shared adversity for millions of years. The Fight Club simply formalizes what we were going to do anyway. As they prepared to leave, Klik-Vorth found himself asking one final question. Admiral, what happens when other human vessels adopt similar programs? Admiral Morrison's smile widened to truly terrifying proportions. Ambassador, what makes you think they haven't already? The walk back to Klik-Vorth's shuttle felt considerably longer than the trip to the Admiral's office. Peripheral Unit 9 maintained his flickering, distressed state, while Klik-Vorth contemplated the diplomatic catastrophe awaiting him at the next Ethics Committee meeting. "Sir," his aide said finally, "what exactly are we going to tell the Council?" Klik-Vorth considered this as they reached the shuttle bay. Through the observation windows, he could see other human vessels moving through local space, each one potentially harboring its own version of organized recreational violence. "We're going to tell them the truth," he said finally, "that humans have developed a cultural practice that strengthens their social cohesion while maintaining strict ethical boundaries, and that any attempt to interfere will likely result in complications." Complications, sir? The kind that involve humans deciding that the Galactic Ethics Committee needs to participate in Fight Club. Klik-Vorth shuddered at the thought. Peripheral Unit 9. Schedule an emergency meeting with the Xenopsychology Department. If we're going to coexist with humans, we need to understand that their version of civilization includes controlled violence as a feature, not a bug. As their shuttle departed the human vessel, Klik-Vorth took one last look at the cargo bay display. Jake Morrison was addressing a crowd of mixed humans, both students and adults, all united in their enthusiasm for organized mayhem. "The first rule of Fight Club," Jake was saying, "is that nobody talks about Fight Club outside of Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is that nobody talks about Fight Club outside of Fight Club. But the third rule, the one that really matters, is that everyone who participates is family." The crowd erupted in approval, and Klik-Vorth realized with dawning horror that he was witnessing the birth of a galactic cultural movement. Humans didn't just practice controlled violence, they evangelized it. "Sir?" Peripheral Unit 9 asked nervously. "What do we do if other species want to establish their own fight clubs?" Klik-Vorth closed all 6 eyes and tried to imagine the Galactic Ethics Committee attempting to regulate recreational violence across dozens of species with varying physiologies, pain tolerances, and concepts of appropriate force. "We start drafting a very long report," he said finally, "and we pray to whatever deities govern diplomatic immunity that the humans don't decide to export their philosophy to the rest of the galaxy." But deep down, Klik-Vorth suspected that prayer was already too late. After all, the first rule of Fight Club was that nobody talked about Fight Club. The second rule, however, seemed to be that everyone wanted to join.